ruminating is really done in this like anger phase of grief. Because a lot of times that's what we're ruminating over. We're ruminating over the injustice of what happened to us, or we're ruminating over not understanding what happened to us and just trying to make sense of everything that took place. And a lot of our anger, well, no, our anger is justified. So one thing that's pretty well understood by most of us is that after we leave a narcissist, we go through a tremendous amount of grief. And you've probably heard about the 5 stages of grief. They're pretty common, but just in case you haven't. So the 5 stages of regular grief, which is usually more associated to when we lose a loved one, or just honestly, just like a typical healthy breakup. We have a denial stage, we have an anger stage, we have a bargaining stage, we have the depressive stage, and then we have the stage of acceptance. And we do go through all 5 of these stages of grief with narcissism, but just like anything else with narcissism, there's a little bit of a twist to the 5 stages of grief with narcissism. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is what do the 5 stages of grief of narcissistic abuse look like? So let's talk about denial. The denial stage is what we talk a lot about with cognitive dissonance and euphoric recall. These keep us in this state of denial where we aren't really able to accept the reality of what's happened to us. And I've talked about cognitive dissonance before. You can find that video on this channel as well. But essentially, a quick recap is cognitive dissonance is a result of what happens from the gaslighting and the blame shifting and the projection, that essentially where our reality has been hijacked from us. So we have a hard time accepting what really happened. Like this is when we're saying things like, was I the problem? Was it really that bad? There's things I could have done better, which may be true. And it's just this confused state of what happened to you. And then we have euphoric recall, which this is going to be where we are trying to recall the euphoria of the love bombing phase, because in any narcissistic abusive relationship, this is when the relationship was at its best, was during the love bombing. That's why we fell in love with them. That's why we even started, because we were in this state of euphoria because the love bombing is so extreme. So that's your denial stage. The next stage is going to be the anger stage. And I think ruminating is really done in this like anger phase of grief, because a lot of times that's what we're ruminating over. We're ruminating over the injustice of what happened to us, or we're ruminating over not understanding what happened to us and just trying to make sense of everything that took place. And a lot of our anger, well, no, our anger is justified with what we went through. We were treated unfairly. We were treated unjustly. We were treated with disrespect. But the anger can sometimes just come in the form of the questions of, well, what did I do to deserve this? Like, I gave my all to this person and they treated me like I was disposable. The next stage is going to be your bargaining stage, but in narcissistic abuse recovery, this is going to be your guilt stage. There's a lot of guilt that's associated with leaving a narcissist. I talk about this on coaching all the time, because there seems to be this spell that we are put under to where we feel guilty for leaving the narcissist in the first place, because they treat us so badly through the whole relationship. And then when we decide to finally choose ourselves and not put up with this behavior anymore, they literally are flabbergasted that we did it. And how dare you? How could you have the audacity to leave me? And it can leave us with this guilt, because they've been feeding us their sob story and how everybody's abandoned them, and everybody's just treated them so badly their entire life. And it's like they're preemptively setting up that guilt. For some of us who are parents like myself, I had a lot of parent guilt. I felt so guilty as a dad that I allowed my children to be exposed to this individual, that I let a monster in my home. I felt guilty for how this relationship affected my relationship with my kid's mom, how it affected my family and just the family dynamic. Like there's a lot of guilt outside, personal guilt, that we feel about the choices and decisions that we made during this relationship as well. Now your depressive stage, this is going to be where you feel like you miss them and you miss And a euphoric recall has a little bit to do with this too, because a lot of times we get wrapped up in the good times and we remember the good things that happened during the relationship. And so we miss that sometimes. But here's the thing that we need to remember. There are normal processes and normal stages of grief that are associated with just losing a relationship, especially a significant relationship where we were married to them, or we lived with them, or we just spent a large amount of time with this person. You're gonna have that phase, even in a healthy breakup, where you're gonna miss that person. You're gonna miss having a partner. You're gonna miss those good times. But the difference with this is we get really frustrated with ourselves, kind of go back to that anger phase, where we don't understand why we're missing this person because they treated us so badly. And this is when we have to really utilize where we're more gracious to ourselves than we are judgmental to ourselves, because it's normal that we miss them. The thing that we have to be careful about is that we don't make emotional decisions in these times where we feel like we miss the narcissist. And then the last one is still gonna just remain the normal stages of grief, which is acceptance. It is extremely, extremely important that we move into a phase of acceptance. But in order to do that, we have to get rid of the cognitive dissonance. We have to overcome the euphoric recall, because we have to accept the reality of the situation that we lived. We have to accept who this person really is. And we also have to accept the fact we're not gonna understand everything, because we're not like them. We're not capable of understanding why they did what they did and all the choices and decisions that they made. Because in order for us to understand it, we would have to reduce ourselves down as a human being just in order to understand it. But that doesn't mean that we can't accept it. We can accept the reality of our situation. We can accept that this is what happened. I made the right choice. I couldn't have avoided anything that they did. This is just who this person is. I'm not going to understand it, but I'm choosing to accept it. Now, the stages of grief, I've done research on this, and they even talk about how, like, the normal stages of grief, it's not necessarily a sequential order where you move through these one at a time. Sometimes you move in and out of these stages of grief. So you can have these times where maybe you accept certain parts of what happened to you, and then other things get brought up, and you realize, like, oh, I still haven't fully accepted this, or, oh, I forgot that this happened. And then maybe you move into the anger phase again, and you move into this I miss them phase again, or it's not gonna happen in a sequential order. We talk about all the time how healing is a continual journey. And I believe that healing is different phases where you arrive to different parts of healing, but I don't really know if we ever get to this point where we're just fully healed. I think we do get to a point where we're healed from narcissistic abuse, but just in life in general, we're always constantly going to be going through things that reveal certain parts of ourselves that need to be worked on or healed. So what I'm working on in my healing journey right now is very different than what I worked on 2 years ago, because I processed a lot of what happened, and, well, pretty much everything that's happened at this point with my narcissistic ex. But that doesn't mean that I'm done healing. There's still things from childhood that I need to work on. There's still insecurities that are there that I need to address. There's still certain narratives that I'm buying into that I don't need to be buying into. So I hope this was helpful and made you feel a little bit more understood and why this grief feels different than other grief. But at the end of the day, it is still grief. At the end of the day, it still is going to take time, and it still is going to take work. But just know that everything that you're going through is normal process of healing from a narcissistic abuser.